The Life and Achievements of Prince Roy Bates. Slide 1, Sealand Founders Day. Good morning, everyone. Today, as we celebrate Sealand Founders Day, we're going to look at the remarkable life of Prince Roy Bates, the man who turned an abandoned wartime sea fort into what became the Principality of Sealand. Roy Bates was not an ordinary founder. He was a soldier, a fisherman, a pirate radio broadcaster, and ultimately the self-proclaimed prince of a tiny platform in the North Sea. His story is one of adventure, determination, family, and above all, an extraordinary belief in independence. Today we'll look at how he came to create Sealand, the challenges he faced, and the legacy he left behind. Slide 2, Before Sealand, A Life of Adventure. Prince Roy was born Patrick Roy Bates in Ealing, London, in 1921. Before Sealand, he had already lived an extraordinary life. During the Second World War, he served with the Royal Fusiliers. He fought in North Africa and Italy, and was wounded during his military service. After the war, Roy worked as a fisherman before becoming involved in pirate radio. This is important, because his experience as a fisherman and his interest in broadcasting eventually led him out into the North Sea and towards the place that would become Sealand. Roy was clearly someone who was comfortable taking risks and doing things differently. Those qualities would become central to his later life. Slide 3, Pirate Radio, The Road to Ruff's Tower. In the 1960s, Britain had a very different broadcasting system from the one we know today. Roy Bates became involved in pirate radio, broadcasting from offshore sea forts. One of his stations was Radio Essex, which operated from Knock John Fort. The idea was to broadcast popular music from outside the normal restrictions of British broadcasting. However, Roy was prosecuted and fined for operating an unlicensed radio station. Rather than giving up, he looked for somewhere even farther offshore. He found Ruff's Tower, another former wartime sea fort, located in the North Sea. And this time, Roy saw more than just a place to broadcast radio. He saw an opportunity. Slide 4, the 2nd of September 1967, Sealand is declared. On the 2nd of September 1967, Roy Bates declared the platform to be the Principality of Sealand. He became Prince Roy, while his wife Joan became Princess Joan. This was the beginning of Sealand as we know it today.
Roy and his family began creating the symbols and institutions of their new principality. Sealand developed its own flag, anthem, constitution, currency, stamps and passports. The motto was, and remains, E Mare Libertas, from the sea, freedom. For Roy, Sealand represented independence and the idea that people could create something of their own rather than simply accepting the rules imposed upon them. Slide 5. Building a nation on a sea fort. Of course, declaring a principality was one thing. Living on an offshore steel platform was something else entirely. The Bates family spent years making Sealand more practical and comfortable. They installed generators, electrical systems, kitchens and other facilities needed for everyday life. Roy and his family weren't simply visiting the platform. They actually lived there and ran their unusual little principality. They also developed the symbols and traditions that helped give Sealand its identity. Whether or not one accepts Sealand as a sovereign country, there is no doubt that Roy succeeded in creating something with a remarkably strong identity and an enduring story. Slide 6. The 1968 court case. One of the most important moments in Sealand's early history came in 1968. Roy Bates's son Michael and another man were involved in a firearms incident on the platform. The case ended up in a British court. The court decided that it did not have jurisdiction because Ruff's Tower was outside Britain's territorial waters at the time. This is a really important point. The ruling did not officially recognize Sealand as an independent country. However, Roy Bates viewed the decision as a major victory. To him, it demonstrated that British authorities could not simply treat Sealand as ordinary British territory. The case became an important part of the story surrounding Sealand and its claim to independence. Slide 7. 1978. Sealand survives an attempted coup. Perhaps the most dramatic chapter in Roy Bates's story happened in 1978. While Roy and Joan were abroad, a group led by Alexander Achenbach took control of Sealand. Roy's son Michael was taken hostage. But the Bates family refused to surrender their platform. Roy and his supporters eventually launched an operation to retake Sealand, including a helicopter assault. The takeover was defeated and the Bates family regained control. Whatever you think about Sealand's claim to nationhood, this episode shows just how seriously Roy Bates took his project. Sealand wasn't simply a publicity stunt to him. It was his home, his family enterprise and his vision of independence. Slide 8. Prince Roy's legacy. So, what is Prince Roy's legacy? First, there is founding. Roy transformed an abandoned military structure into a place with its own identity, traditions and institutions. Second, there is resilience. He faced legal challenges, financial difficulties and even an attempted takeover, but continued to defend the project. And third, there is imagination. Roy Bates demonstrated the power of a bold idea. He took something most people would have regarded as an abandoned piece of metal in the sea, and turned it into a story known around the world. His motto, "From the sea, freedom," captures the spirit behind that story. Slide 9. Conclusion. Prince Roy Bates died in 2012, but the story he created continues. Sealand remains a fascinating example of independence, unconventional thinking and determination. For Founders Day, we can remember Roy not simply as the man who called himself a prince, but as someone who had an unusual idea and devoted much of his life to making that idea real. He created something that has survived for decades and has become part of popular culture and modern history. Whether we view Sealand as a country, a micronation, or simply one of the world's most extraordinary family projects, its story would not exist without Roy Bates. And perhaps that is the most fitting way to remember him. A man who looked out across the sea, saw possibility where others saw an abandoned fort, and decided to build his own world. Thank you. Baron George Day. Bark.com. Pastoral therapist. Addictions, mental health, conflicting values.